It was supposed to be the proudest moment of my life, the day Alex, our only son, left for college. I had imagined this day for years, carefully preparing for it, like a soldier preparing for battle. I had envisioned the moment when he'd drive off filled with excitement and hope for his future, leaving us behind to start his own life. But that morning, the joy I thought I'd feel quickly dissolved into something far more complex, something I wasn't prepared for. I had spent the last few weeks juggling between helping Alex pack planning for the long road trip and preparing myself emotionally for this milestone, and yet nothing could have prepared me for the reality of the situation. Watching him take the final step toward adulthood should have been exhilarating, but instead it left an empty, aching void in my chest. This wasn't just about Alex leaving. It was about something deeper, something I hadn't been willing to face. Mark, my husband, had been different for months. He was distant, distracted, and withdrawn. But I attributed it to the stress of our son's transition. I convinced myself that once Alex was settled into college, everything would go back to normal. But as we stood together in the kitchen that morning, finalizing the last details of the trip, I realized just how wrong I had been. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife, but I ignored it, focusing on Alex and the future he was about to step into. As we finished loading the last of Alex's bags into the car, I turned to Mark. Trying to keep things light, I expected him to share in the excitement, to be as proud and sentimental as I was. But instead, his eyes were clouded and his lips tightened, as if he was holding something back. I tried to smile, offering a few words of encouragement, but Mark's response was cold, distant. The warmth I once felt between us was gone, replaced by something much darker and more unsettling. My gut twisted and my heart sank, but I brushed it off. Maybe it was just nerves. After all, this was a huge transition for everyone. Alex, oblivious to the undercurrent of tension, was already in the car, fidgeting with his phone. He was excited about the new chapter of his life, as he should be. As a mother, I was proud, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change, something that had been brewing beneath the surface for far too long. I tried to push the thought away, but it lingered, nagging at me as I helped him with his seatbelt and kissed him goodbye. "Call us when you get there," I told him, trying to keep my voice steady. As we drove to the university, the silence between Mark and me was deafening. The usual small talk, the little jokes we shared in the past, were gone. Instead, the only sounds in the car were the hum of the engine and the occasional direction from the GPS. The closer we got to the campus, the heavier the air seemed to get. I could feel it, the unspoken words, the unsaid truths that had been festering for months. Finally, as we parked in front of Alex's dorm, Mark turned to me, his expression unreadable. For a brief moment, I wondered if he was going to say something reassuring, something to ease the knot in my stomach. But instead, his words hit me like a thunderclap, leaving me paralyzed in my seat. "Rachel," he said, his voice low but firm, "I'm leaving you." My heart skipped a beat, and I felt my chest tighten as if the very air had been sucked out of me. I stared at him, unable to comprehend what I had just heard. It was like my brain couldn't process, the words couldn't fathom the reality of what he was saying. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, afraid to hear the answer. "I've been thinking about it for a long time," he continued, his voice flat and devoid of any emotion. "I don't love you anymore. I need to move on." His words were like ice water thrown into my face, and I felt the shock ripple through my entire body. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't move. My thoughts scattered, and for a moment all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. This couldn't be real. It couldn't be happening. This was the day Alex was supposed to begin his future, and yet here I was on the edge of losing mine. Mark's gaze was unwavering, and as I looked at him, I saw something I hadn't expected, a coldness, a detachment that made my stomach turn. The man I had shared my life with, the father of our child, was telling me that it was over. Just like that. It felt like a cruel joke, an illusion that I was somehow going to wake up from. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw the truth. He was done. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but nothing came out. How was this even possible? How had we gone from being a happy family to this? Had I missed the signs? Was I really that blind to the cracks forming beneath the surface? The pain surged through me in waves, but I couldn't let Alex see it. I couldn't let him know what was happening. Not on his first day of college. He didn't deserve this. Mark didn't seem to care. He opened the door, stepping out of the car without another word, and just like that, he was gone. Walking away, leaving me there shattered, as our son took his first steps into the future, and as my world came crashing down around me. The air felt thicker now, heavy with the weight of Mark's words. I sat there in the car, stunned and unable to process what had just been said. The world around me seemed to slow down, and my senses became heightened. The sound of Alex's excited chatter about his new dorm, about his plans for the semester, felt distant, as if I were listening to it through a fog. The only thing I could focus on was Mark's face, now turned away from me, as he stared out the window, his posture rigid. There was a long, uncomfortable silence between us, stretching far longer than any of us could endure. My mind raced, trying to comprehend what he had just told me. This couldn't be happening. Not today. Not now. Not when everything was supposed to be about Alex. But here we were on the edge of something. I wasn't ready for something I had never imagined in my worst nightmares. I blinked, trying to steady myself, but the tears that I had been holding back started to well up in my eyes. I wiped them quickly, not wanting Alex to see. Not wanting to ruin this day for him, but the floodgates were opening and I couldn't stop it. Mark didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he didn't care. He was already lost in his own thoughts. His mind made up. I tried to speak, but my throat tightened, and all that came out was a strangled gasp. How could he do this now? Why didn't he say something sooner? "Mark, please," I whispered, my voice cracking. "What are you saying? Are you serious?" He didn't even turn to look at me. His gaze remained fixed on the horizon, like he was already 1,000,000 miles away. His mind already in the process of leaving. "I've been serious for a long time," he replied flatly, his voice devoid of any emotion. "I've tried to make it work, Rachel. I really have, but I can't keep living this lie. I'm not happy, and I haven't been for a long time." His words were like daggers to my heart, each one driving deeper into my chest. My mind reeled, and I couldn't keep up with the rapid succession of thoughts racing through my head. Had I really missed all the signs? How long had he been feeling this way? Was I so blind that I hadn't seen him slipping away piece by piece? You're just gonna leave. Just like that. I managed to choke out my voice, trembling. The tears came now, and I couldn't stop them. I felt utterly betrayed, as if my whole world had just been ripped apart in an instant. Mark sighed a deep, exasperated breath. "I didn't want it to happen this way, but I don't know how else to say it. I'm done, Rachel. I've met someone else." He finally turned to me, then his eyes meeting mine for the first time since the words left his mouth. The look in his eyes was not one of guilt or remorse, but of cold finality. "I've been seeing her for months. I'm not going back." The words hung in the air like a poison swirling around me, suffocating me with their truth. I felt a wave of nausea rise in my throat, and for a moment, I thought I might actually lose control. But I couldn't let that happen. Not here. Not now. I had to keep it together for Alex. He couldn't know this was happening. Not today. Not on his first day of college. "Who is she?" I managed to whisper, my heart pounding in my chest. Mark hesitated for a second, the briefest flicker of something crossing his face, but it was gone before I could read it. "It doesn't matter. She's someone I met at work. I'm sorry, Rachel. But I can't pretend anymore. I need to be with her." The finality of his words hit me harder than anything else. There was no turning back now. This wasn't a bad dream, a momentary lapse in judgment. This was real. And it was happening right now, on the worst possible day. I looked over at Alex, still chatting excitedly about the campus, and his new roommates completely oblivious to the devastation unfolding in the front seat. I wanted to tell him to scream at Mark to demand answers, but I couldn't. I couldn't ruin this day for him. He deserved to have one moment, just one moment where everything was still okay, where he could walk into his new life with no idea that his mother's life was crumbling right alongside his. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. This wasn't about me right now. It was about Alex. "You should go," I said quietly, my voice more composed than I felt. "I'll handle this. I'll take care of things. Just don't ruin today for him." Mark gave a single imperceptible nod and opened the car door, stepping out without another word. His departure felt like the final nail in the coffin, the last goodbye before everything changed. And as he walked away, I felt the weight of his absence press down on me. But before I could process what had just happened, before I could even begin to fully understand the depth of my despair, a voice came from behind me. A stranger. Someone I had never seen before was standing at the edge of the parking lot. They were watching me, observing the scene with an intensity I hadn't expected. "Are you okay?" the stranger asked, their voice gentle but firm. I turned to look at them, not sure what to say. Who was this person? Why were they here? But as I looked into their eyes, something shifted. There was an understanding there, a compassion that I couldn't explain. I don't know," I whispered, my voice cracking once again. The stranger took a step forward, offering a reassuring smile. "You don't have to go through this alone." And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I realized I wasn't entirely alone. Not anymore. I sat there in the car for what felt like an eternity, the weight of Mark's words still pressing heavily on my chest. His absence left a suffocating silence in the air, the kind that filled a room when you couldn't escape the reality of what was happening. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. I had to face the truth. My life, as I knew it, was over. It felt like the ground beneath me had cracked open, and I was teetering on the edge of something I couldn't even begin to understand. But then, just as I was about to spiral further into despair, I felt something shift, a presence. I turned my eyes, instinctively drawn to the stranger standing just a few feet away. At first, I couldn't process it. Who was this person? How long had they been there? I hadn't noticed them approach, yet somehow they were standing there now, watching me with a quiet intensity that I hadn't expected. The stranger was a woman, probably in her mid-30s, dressed casually but with an air of quiet confidence. Her brown hair was pulled back into a ponytail, and her eyes, dark but warm, held a softness that immediately put me at ease. She didn't look like someone who had any business being here, but there was something about her presence that felt grounding, like she understood what I was going through, even though I hadn't spoken a word to her. She stepped forward cautiously, almost as if she were giving me space to process what had just happened. I wanted to ask her who she was, why she was here, but before I could speak, she spoke first. "Are you okay?" Her voice was calm, steady. It was the kind of voice that didn't rush. You didn't pressure you to answer right away, but instead allowed you to breathe through the moment. I blinked, still trying to reconcile her presence with the storm raging inside me. I glanced over at Alex, who was still obliviously occupied with his phone, and then back at the stranger. My instincts told me to respond, to tell her that everything was fine, that I didn't need anyone's help. But the words caught in my throat, and all I could do was shake my head, silently begging for her to understand. She must have noticed my distress because she took a step closer, her expression softening. "I know it's hard," she said, her voice low, "but you don't have to go through this alone." I swallowed hard, trying to hold back the flood of emotions that threatened to spill over. I wasn't sure why, but something in her words, so simple, so genuine, touched something deep inside me. I wasn't used to relying on strangers, especially not in a moment like this, But there was something about this woman that made it hard to shut her out. "I don't even know who you are," I said, my voice shaky, "but why are you here? How did you even know?" The stranger smiled slightly, but there was no judgment in her expression, no hint of concern over my questions. "I didn't know you needed help. I just saw you sitting here, and something told me you might." I've been through a lot of difficult moments myself, and I've learned that sometimes you just need someone to acknowledge what you're going through. Her words resonated with me on a level I couldn't explain. I hadn't realized just how much I needed someone to acknowledge my pain, someone to see me even in this moment of devastation. It wasn't that I wanted her to fix everything or to take away my pain. I just wanted someone to share this weight with me, even if only for a moment. "I don't know what to do," I said, my voice breaking. "My husband, Mark, he's leaving me today of all days. On Alex's first day of college, I don't know how to process this, how to even start." The stranger's gaze softened even more, and she nodded slowly. "It's a lot to take in. A sudden change, especially when it happens so unexpectedly. But I promise you, you're not alone in this. It might feel like it now, but in time, you'll find your way. And until then, it's okay to lean on someone." I felt a tear slip down my cheek, and for the first time since Mark's announcement, I didn't try to stop it. This woman, this stranger, was giving me permission to feel, to be vulnerable, something I hadn't allowed myself to do in front of anyone, not even Alex. I don't know what to say," I whispered, still unable to process the magnitude of everything that was happening. I've spent so many years building my life around him, around our family, and now it's all falling apart. I don't know how to start over. The stranger stepped closer, her eyes unwavering as she looked at me. "It's okay to feel lost, but you don't have to figure it all out right now. Sometimes the first step is just allowing yourself to breathe, to take one step at a time." Her words, though simple, felt like a lifeline. I was drowning in emotions, in confusion, in the unbearable weight of betrayal. But this woman, who didn't know me from Adam, was giving me the space to breathe, to take a moment for myself. "You'll find your strength," she continued. "You're stronger than you think, and you'll get through this. You might not believe it now, but trust me, you will." I looked at her for a long time, processing everything she had said, the gentle sincerity in her eyes. Somehow, in this brief encounter, she had managed to offer me something I hadn't even realized. I needed hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make me believe that maybe, just maybe, I could make it through this. Make it. As the minutes ticked by, I realized that this stranger had already given me more than Mark had in years. And for the first time that day, I allowed myself to take a breath, to hold on to the fragile thread of hope she had extended to me. Maybe the world wasn't as lost as I thought. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. The days following Mark's announcement were a blur. I tried to go through the motions of getting Alex settled at college, pretending everything was fine for his sake. The campus was buzzing with excitement, new beginnings and possibilities, but I felt like I was in a fog, walking through life without truly being present. My heart wasn't in it. It couldn't be my marriage. The foundation of everything I'd known had crumbled right before my eyes. Mark had left without a second thought. He didn't even offer to help with the transition. It was as if he had already mentally checked out long before he ever said the words. The only thing that kept me going was Alex. I didn't want him to feel the weight of the mess I was drowning in. Not today, not on his first day. I plastered a smile on my face, told him I'd be fine, and watched him walk away off into his new life, never once suspecting the turmoil that was tearing apart the one person who had always been his constant me. But then as the days turned into weeks, the strangest thing happened. The stranger who had spoken to me in the parking lot that day kept checking in. At first, I thought it was just a momentary kindness, a one-off encounter. But every few days, she'd reach out by phone, by text, or even just a quick message on social media. Her name was Sarah. And though I didn't know her from Adam, she seemed to have an uncanny ability to sense when I was at my lowest, when I needed someone to talk to the most. It wasn't like I sought her out, but I found myself responding to her texts, opening up in ways I never had before. She had a calm, non-judgmental way about her that made me feel safe. And over the course of a few weeks, we started meeting for coffee, talking about life and inevitably about what had happened with Mark. One afternoon, I met her at a cafe near the university. It was a cool, crisp day, and the warmth of the coffee in my hands was a welcome contrast to the cold emptiness I'd been feeling inside. We sat across from each other, talking as if we'd known each other for years. I told her how everything felt so surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. She listened patiently, her gentle smile never faltering, her eyes filled with empathy. As the conversation turned more personal, she finally shared something with me that made my heart skip a beat. "You know, Rachel," she said softly, her voice a little hesitant, "I've been where you are. I know what it's like to feel like your whole world is falling apart. I'm not just someone who's offering advice from the outside. I've lived through it, and I'm here for you." I looked at her in confusion, my brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" I asked, suddenly uneasy. "You've been through it?" Sarah took a deep breath, and for the first time I saw a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. "Yes," she said quietly, "I have. But it's not what you think. I'm not just here as a friend. I'm here because I know the truth about your husband." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. The truth about Mark. What did she mean? My mind raced trying to process what she was implying. You know something about Mark?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What do you know? What's going on?" Sarah paused for a moment as if choosing her words carefully. "I'm not trying to cause you more pain, but I think it's time you understood the full picture. I think you deserve to know everything." I leaned forward, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to know. I needed to understand what had happened. Had Mark been seeing someone else the whole time? Was there more to this than I realized? "I'm listening," I said, barely able to get the words out. Sarah took a deep breath and began to explain. "Rachel, Mark didn't just meet someone else at work. He didn't just fall out of love with you overnight. There's a lot more to this situation than he's letting on. And I think you need to know the truth for your own peace of mind." The weight of her words hung in the air as I waited for her to continue. What could she possibly know that would change everything? "I was the one who helped him," she said quietly, her voice filled with a mixture of guilt and honesty. "I was the one who supported him when he started pulling away from you, when he was struggling with things he couldn't share with you, things he didn't feel comfortable telling anyone. He didn't fall out of love with you, Rachel. He's been battling something much deeper for a long time." I stared at her, trying to comprehend what she was saying. Was she telling me that Mark wasn't just leaving because of another woman, that there was some deeper, darker reason for his sudden departure? Sarah nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving mine. "I know this is a lot to process, but Mark has been dealing with some personal demons, and they've been affecting every part of his life. I wasn't supposed to tell you this, but I feel you deserve to know Mark's been struggling with something from his past, something he's never told you about, and it's been tearing him apart." My heart was racing as I listened to Sarah's words. What was she saying? What had Mark been hiding? I had to know more, but I was also terrified of what the truth might be. She hesitated for a moment before continuing. "Mark's been dealing with trauma from his childhood. It's something he hasn't been able to confront, something he hasn't shared with anyone. He doesn't know how to process it, and that's why he's been pulling away. He didn't know how to talk about it, so instead, he built walls. He pushed you away. But it wasn't because he stopped loving you. It was because he didn't know how to handle what he was going through." My mind was reeling, but Sarah's words began to make sense in a way. Maybe Mark's distance wasn't entirely his fault. Maybe I hadn't been the one to fail, but rather we had both been failing to understand what was really happening beneath the surface. His silence had been a form of self-preservation, not rejection, but still, it didn't change the fact that he had left. He had abandoned us when we needed him most. The pain was still there, sharp and deep, but now there was a new layer of understanding. The revelation didn't excuse Mark's actions, but it gave me a new perspective. It didn't make the hurt go away, but it opened up the possibility for healing. Maybe not with Mark, but for myself. I'm not saying this makes it okay, Sarah added softly, but I think you deserve the truth, and you deserve to take control of your own life now. As the weight of her words settled over me, I realized that for the first time in a long time, I was starting to take back control. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I knew I was going to be okay. I didn't need Mark's approval or his love to be whole. I had strength inside of me, strength I hadn't recognized until now. And as I looked across the table at Sarah, the stranger who had somehow become my unexpected ally, I felt a sense of gratitude. For the first time in weeks, I felt the glimmer of hope I had been desperately searching for. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I knew I wasn't alone anymore. As the weeks passed, I started to piece together a life that was unfamiliar, yet strangely liberating. I spent more time reflecting on the revelations Sarah had shared with me. She'd given me the kind of perspective I had desperately needed. Mark's departure had been painful, but it wasn't the end of the world. It felt like it at first. Yes, but slowly I began to understand that this was just the beginning of something new. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that I didn't need Mark's approval or his love to define who I was. I had spent so many years tethered to his expectations, his moods, and his needs. Now it was my turn to reclaim myself. I started doing the things I had always put off, taking yoga classes, traveling to places I had always wanted to visit, and focusing on my career in ways I hadn't allowed myself to before. Each day became a new opportunity to redefine my life. I was no longer just Mark's wife or Alex's mom. I was Rachel, a woman who had strength, resilience, and the ability to start fresh. And with that new identity, I slowly began to heal. But it wasn't just about self-discovery. It was also about forgiveness. I had to learn to forgive Mark, not because what he did was excusable, but because holding on to resentment would only keep me trapped. I realized that his actions, as hurtful as they were, weren't a reflection of my worth. I wasn't broken because of him. I was whole, and I could rebuild my life on my own terms. Of course, forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation. I knew Mark was still working through his own demons. His struggles, though they hadn't been fully communicated to me, were something he had to face on his own. He had to figure out his own way forward, just as I had to figure out mine. And that's when I realized that sometimes letting go isn't about closing the door forever. It's about giving each other space to grow separately. Maybe one day we would cross paths again, but for now we each had our own paths to walk. Alex, too, was a constant source of strength. Watching him embark on his own journey at college reminded me of the importance of moving forward. I saw so much of myself in him, so much potential, so much promise. He was his own person now, and it was time for him to explore the world just as it was time for me to do the same. In the quiet moments when the world around me seemed to settle into a new rhythm, I found myself thinking about Sarah. She had been the catalyst, the unexpected stranger who had stepped into my life at a time when I felt most alone. What she gave me was more than just emotional support. She gave me the courage to face my reality. She reminded me that there were people who cared, people who understood people, who were willing to be there for you even if you didn't ask for it. Looking back, I now see that my journey had been a series of small, powerful steps, each one leading me closer to the woman I was meant to become. Yes, there were moments of doubt, moments when I thought I couldn't keep going. But in those moments, I found the strength to keep moving forward. And with each step, the weight of Mark's departure felt a little less heavy. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The journey to healing wasn't instantaneous, and it wasn't perfect. There were still days when the pain of the past crept in, when I thought about the family we had been and wondered if it could ever be the same again. But then I would remember that sometimes things fall apart so that they can be rebuilt into something stronger, something more authentic. And that's what I was doing, rebuilding piece by piece until I could look at myself in the mirror and see someone who was whole, someone who had survived the storm and was ready for whatever came next. As I look toward the future, I know it won't always be easy. Life is unpredictable, and sometimes it throws curveballs that we never saw coming. But I also know that I'm not alone. I have my son, my friends, and the quiet strength within me that I never realized existed. I have the support of people like Sarah, who reminded me that there is always room for hope, even when everything seems lost. And most importantly, I have the freedom to move forward on my own terms. This story isn't just about betrayal or heartbreak. It's about growth, healing, and the power of resilience. It's about learning to find your way when the road seems impossible, and understanding that no matter what happens, you can rebuild. Because sometimes, the hardest moments in life lead to the most beautiful transformations. As I sit here reflecting on everything that's happened, I'm filled with a quiet sense of peace. My life may have taken an unexpected turn, but I now know that the road ahead is mine to shape, and I'm ready to walk it.